very bubbly. I didn't shake the can. Oh well. Hello, my name's Shriya and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Shriya's Music. Today I can finally do this video that I've been meaning to do for ages, but I haven't been able to do it because I haven't had my results yet, but now I can. So this is how I got all 8s and 9s at GCSE. Tip number 1 is make your revision resources from the start. I started this in year 10 and for me this was making online flashcards. I just used the revision guides and textbooks to just make the flashcards. Like when I got home after school I would just make all the flashcards I could. And I'm not gonna lie and say I was perfect, like I was not fully up to date. There was like loads of topics that I didn't have time to do before the exams. It still helped so much starting this in year 10 because it's not like proper revision, it's not like going through flashcards, it's not really mentally draining, it's just giving a little bit of my time to prepare for year 11, you know. My second tip is to do with like the steps of revision. No one really told me this, but this is the kind of like pathway of revision that works for me. This eye. I've got an eye infection and I've had this for a month, so excuse me if like one of my eyes seems like really small compared to the other one. It's just really hard to keep it open. I've just had no motivation for weeks because it's just been really annoying. But anyway, and so this starts with understanding, and understanding, the first step, that starts in the classroom with the teacher explaining something. And then when you get home, if you still don't understand it, watching videos, reading the revision guide, also making notes. I know people are like against notes in the form of revision, but I think they're useful in helping you to process information. So if you're reading through it and writing down like the key points, it helps you to understand and process the information. The next step, and this is what I like call the learning stage, and this is where you memorize all the information that you now understand. I used online flashcards. You can also use real life flashcards. I also, like, you know, you can get a sheet of paper, fold it in half, put the questions on one side and the answers on the other. And next, the final step, wait, is this the final step? Kind of the final step. The third step is exam practice, because you're preparing all of this for an exam. You're gonna want to do practice papers, practice questions. The website PMT I used a lot, and it has it split down for each subject and then the topics within that subject, and it's just got like a handful of questions and answers on each. I would just go on there, pick some random topics that I had just like finished doing the flashcards of, and then I'd just print them off, or even not print them off and just read through them and just answer them in my head, and then check how I was doing. The kind of final step of this is just the reminder kind of stage. For me it helped to make notes, and also blurting is a really useful technique. So I'd just quickly go through my flashcards, I'd look through them, and then I'd like cover the answer part and I'd just read through the questions, and then I'd just make notes, but just answering the questions, because the questions were all the information I needed to know for GCSE. So I was having to think about it. My third tip is getting a good textbook or good textbooks for all your subjects. For me personally, when I'm learning something, I need to know I have all the information that I need to know. It's up to me to do well, essentially, and it's not based on like how good my teachers are. I use the CGP revision guides to do this because they, especially at GCSE, they really followed the specification and they had all the information I needed to know. And these are what I used to make my flashcards. And especially for the sciences, so biology, chemistry and physics, those were what I used the revision guides most for. Tip number 4 is to use flashcards. And I know these aren't everyone's kind of cup of tea, and you might like not be able to focus as much using them. And yeah, I did find using the flashcards boring a lot of the time, but I have quite like a logical brain, and so I need to know the method I'm using makes sense. And to me, flashcards made the most sense. It feels like you're actively testing yourself, and I feel like it's very scientifically backed. So I use this app called Anki, and you can get it for free on a laptop or desktop, and basically it uses spaced repetition and active recall to help ensure you're learning everything. So active recall is basically you're actively testing yourself, you're actively thinking about it. Spaced repetition is more difficult to explain, so I'm gonna have a go, but you can also watch videos on this. But it's basically you learn information, you remember it to your 100%, but then you start forgetting about it, and then you need to keep going back to it before you forget about it fully. And then over time, you're going to be less likely to forget it, and that curve of forgetting about it is going to be less and less steep until you remember it. Anki employs that in the flashcards. You can go through your flashcards and then you can sort them out into easy, good, hard, and then just again. And this sorts them into like when you're gonna redo that flashcard. So easy might be 2 days, good is 1 day, hard is 15 minutes, and then again is like 1 minute. It's just making sure you keep going over the ones you find more difficult to understand, and it was literally probably the most helpful thing for me in achieving all 8s and 9s. My 5th tip, I think, is don't revise all the time. So I think it's more about quality, not quantity, of your revision. I remember in the Easter holidays before the Year 11 exams, I was revising 2 hours to around 4 hours at most. And when I got back to school, I was hearing like everyone around me being like, "How long did you revise for, Shriya?" And then them saying, "Oh, I revised for 8 hours. I revised for 6 hours every day." And I got so scared because I was thinking, did I not revise enough? Since I've been doing little bits of revision since year 10, and because I've been kind of making sure I'm learning, I didn't need to revise as much for as long in year 11. Start early with a little bit, make sure you're prepared, make sure you've found a revision technique that makes sense to you. For me, this was Anki, and that was perfect for me. My next tip is to do with your mental process and how you view the act of revision. I think a lot of people, they view revision as like a task and burdensome, and I know I did for mainly in year 11. In year 10 it wasn't as much though. You end up procrastinating, scrolling, playing games, talking to your friends, and it just makes it really difficult to get any revision done. In my opinion, it helps to try and view it as something more enjoyable or something you have to do if you can't enjoy it. For example, like going to school is something you have to do. Brushing your teeth is something you just do because you have to do it, right? If you view it as something that's part of your routine, you build it into your routine, then you're gonna hopefully find it easier to revise. Okay, my phone kind of just died, so this is an hour or so later after reading in the garden for a while. Okay, so the next tip is to treat your mocks as the real thing. And I know many people would probably see this as a very stressful tip because the real thing is seen as stressful, but I think it's useful to figure out where you are. If you had your GCSEs now, what would you actually be getting? And that's all mocks are. Look at the subjects you've done lower than you wanted in grades, and you should focus more on them in the future. So for me, I've always been getting a 9 in biology. That's personally for me what I've been getting. And in year 10, in my first mocks, I got a low 8, and like that's a great grade, but for me, it wasn't what I know I can get. Since biology was probably like my favourite subject at the time, it was also more what's going on, and it was just because I wasn't revising it as much because I always found it easy. Before the next mocks, I focused more on biology and I revised more, and I ended up getting very high 9. I'm not saying you need to get 92 out of 100, I'm just saying, by focusing on that subject in particular, I ended up doing better than I'd imagined. So, whatever grade you're aiming for, whatever grades that you're more disappointed in, focus on those and you can get them to the level you want them to be. And it means you also know which subjects maybe revise them too much. So I know for the subjects I enjoyed, I revised it more and I didn't really need to as much. The next tip is to do with coursework. And for me, this was art GCSE. This tip is basically trying to stay on top of your coursework and be organised, because it will help you with all your other subjects as well. I know this was probably one of the biggest struggles in doing art, was just finding when to do it and the motivation to do it. So I made sure that I would get stuff done. I made time every day, and I think there's a lot of thinking involved with coursework. I spent 50% of my time doing art coursework just thinking about what I'm doing, where I want to go with it, and that helped me achieve higher because I was really planning out where I wanted to go. Honestly, I think completing my art coursework probably took up the same amount of time as all my revision in all the other subjects, just because there's so much to do. So it's really good to stay on top of your coursework. Don't sacrifice quantity for quality. It's all good and well staying on top of your deadlines, but if the work you're doing isn't of a good enough quality, then you haven't thought enough about it. Okay, my next tip is your mindset. This was a big one for me because I've struggled with this. I've also improved a lot in my mindset, and it's how you view your different subjects is basically what I'm trying to say. So if you view a subject in a more positive light, then you're going to end up doing better in it, and if you view one as more negative, then you're going to end up doing worse in it. For example, English literature and English language, I really found it difficult, and I was stressing about it, overthinking about it, and I just viewed it in such a negative light. And because of that negative viewpoint of it, I ended up doing worse in English than my other subjects. Instead, I realised, okay, I'm going to need to think about this. I was searching everywhere I could for how can I do better at English. So I was looking at grade 9 essays that my brother had written. I was finding all the structures I could. I was just figuring out how I could write my perfect essay. And once I realised I didn't have to follow a specific way of doing it, and there were so many different ways of achieving highly, it helped me to view it in a more positive light and figure out my way of doing well in English, if that makes sense. I don't have the most amazing analysis skills, so instead of that I used grade 9 context, and I memorised that your grades aren't fixed. A subject that you say is difficult, is a challenge, you can change that, I firmly believe. And yes, maybe you definitely do find a subject harder than the others, but that doesn't mean that you can't achieve highly. Okay, the next tip is to be organised, and for me, this didn't involve timetables. I did not like timetables. They were too rigid for me. Instead, I kept track of where I was in the whole spec in each subject, and this really helped for me. So especially with revision guides, the contents table, it has all the topics and all the separate subtopics within those topics, and by tracking where I was in the topics, in learning, making flashcards, that kind of organisation really helps in your kind of overall understanding of a subject. Maybe timetables will work for you, but specifically for me, they were too rigid. My next tip is to set aims. These kind of give you a sense of direction during your revision for GCSEs, because I think sometimes it can feel kind of pointless. You just sit down with a textbook and you're just well, what am I meant to do? What am I doing this for? Why am I revising? So it's kind of useful to set aims, set something you want to achieve. I felt a lot of pressure to do well with what with my brother doing so well at his GCSEs and just kind of being inspired by the people around me and how well they've done, and being motivated by how well they've done, but also feeling this pressure to kind of live up to them. And that can be bad, and at times it was too much pressure, but in a way it's good to have aims and don't expect yourself to get them straight away. It's kind of like stepping stones. So you know how I said focus on your mocks and treat them as the real thing? Your mocks are kind of like stepping stones on the way to achieving your aims, or you could even do aims for each mock. And also be lenient on your aims, because your ability or your mental ability can change over time. Lower your aims slightly, that's completely fine. So don't see the aims as something that's like a straitjacket, like you are limited, you have to get them. See them as kind of a light on your path, like leading you where you want to go. So yeah, thank you for listening. Those are all my tips. If I think of any more, I'll make a new video. But I hope this is helpful. This is just how I personally went about getting all my 8s and 9s. And I feel like, well, I've always wanted to help other people. I've always wanted to kind of tutor, but I've always been the quiet kid, and it's kind of annoying because I feel like I understand. I feel like I can help, so this is my way of trying to help out and hopefully help some people out there. I hope these tips are useful. Good luck with whichever year you're going into. Enjoy it, don't be too stressed. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.